Hi, and welcome back to Spirit Lounge, and a continuation with the Upanisads. So we're on to the next chapter about ethics. This is another precursor introductory chapter, so we'll get straight into it. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this should be a little bit shorter than the last video. Okay, so it's called ethics. It's a continuation from the last chapter, which is talking about individual ignorance and wisdom, and this is talking about the ethical part of what the Upanisads promote. And it's good precursor information because when we get into the Upanisads, this is the kind of stuff that we're going to be revisiting over and over again. Okay, so the Vedas were the fifth Sanskrit text from the four main Vedas, which are the Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva, and the Upanisads were the spiritual esoteric composition, the collective composition of what was put together between 700 and 400 BC. Okay, some more terms that we're going to go through. We'll be building these as we walk through the introduction, and I'll be just before we jump into the Upanisads themselves, I'll show everybody what these are. All of them that we'll be going through, I have tried to capture them as we walk through, and I'll put them all together later, but these are some that we'll go through. Some of these Nisa, which is setting down, which is another word for renunciation. Karuna, which is compassion. Mauna, which is silence. Tapas, self-discipline. Krodha, anger. Lobha, greed. Asura, demons. Manusya, which is men. Deva are gods. Prajapati, which is a creative deity archetype. Daya, which is compassion. Dana, which is self-sacrifice. Dharma, which is self-restraint. Samnyasa, which is renunciation, which is also linked to Nyasa, and then the other ones we've revisited before. So as we build these up, we'll get a little bit of a dictionary going about what these mean. Okay, so the Upanisads insist on the importance of ethical life. This could be said for any practice whatsoever, and just a general I would say ambition for humanity, for us all to live an ethical life, to repudiate the self-sufficiency of the ego, which basically means to reject that we're here just to feed our ego and give it sufficiency. Emphasize the practice of moral virtues. Man is responsible for his acts. Absolutely, we are responsible for everything that we do, every action, word, thought, and intention. It's not an act of God; it's an act of us in the world that we live in. Evil is the free act of the individual, absolutely, of free will. Choice, which affirms the infinite. So we have a choice to affirm the infinite, or the opposite, which we call evil. Evil is the result of our alienation from the real self. Explains itself. We are to break with evil and to attain freedom. Man has in him the element of non-being, which exposes him to evil. So we have the ability, we have what's called non-being, the element of non-being. What is that? We have the all possibility and probability. We have free will. We can go either way. We can go towards grace, or we can go towards non-grace, godlessness or grace, whichever we choose. And there's many vibrational representations of ourselves in between. We have to burst the revolving cycle of nature, i.e. the ego, objective, physical being, and to become a citizen of another source. Man is the mediator between God and nature. We choose through free will. Do we go towards the physical nature, objective physicality of ourselves, or we move ourselves towards a divine graceful existence? To complete the work. The antithesis, which is the opposite, between what we wish to be and what we are, is implicitly their unity. That's true, they're both interlinked. What we are and what we wish to be is exactly the same. We are where we wish to be. Of course, we move forward into further expansive states or negating states, but we are where we wish to be at this moment. Divine consciousness must become our consciousness and will. Actual self must cease to be a private self. What that basically means is that our private practice, we need to start to become that. As we say every time we finish a video, is that we're to become that which we seek, that which we're trying to be, we're trying to get to. So it stops becoming a private notion within ourselves and we become it externally. We speak our truth also. Freedom of the human individual is assumed, though the limitations of karma are mentioned. So it's talking about our karmic actions, words, thoughts and intentions are those that limit us. But freedom is an implicit assumption. Freedom increases to the extent to which he identifies himself with the Absolute. If we leave the world after having known the true self, then our life in all worlds is the life of freedom, which means we're not subject to, we've released ourselves from the subjugation and objectification of physical matter, objectivity, physicality, materialism. We experience infinite being through the vibration of absolute grace. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan states, the self is the overseer of all actions, which it is, also the owner of all actions, all outcomes, who apportions to each person his qualities, who executes justice, who restrains the evil, allots good fortune. Also, the opposite could be true with free will. Okay, the Upanisads insist on a spirit of detachment. This is a good slide, this. We'll go into this a little bit more as we traverse this section. And so detachment is not a denial of the world, it's just a detachment to the things within it. It's not saying that we have to be indifferent to the world or abandon everything that's in it or hide in caves. This was something that was done back in the ages. But it's the attachment to things. We're here to experience this. When you grow spiritually within the duality of the physical material, it's a very strong development. Hiding oneself away from that which can distract you is not really a persistent, strong, stoic development. Have to be in that which we're trying to transcend away from to be truly strengthened in spiritual force. And this is saying, be in it but not attached to these things. So detachment is not a denial of world, not denial of the world, it's not indifference to the world, it's not abandonment of objects, but non-attachment to them. We do not raise above the world. We do not raise above the world by contempt for the world. We have to be tranquil, envy no man, fear no one. Hindu thinkers ask us to adopt samnyasa, which is called relinquishment, renunciation of home and possessions. This is, again, wording from the past, but this is effectively relinquishment or renunciation means detachment. 3 great renunciations that they say are, and 3 vows which they have in Hinduism, which I didn't state here because they were very traditional. Samnyasa does not mean that we owe no duties to the world, only from realistic duties, ritualistic duties. Fruits of spirit ripen on the soil of detachment. So as we mentioned, samnyasa is actually renunciation or detachment, really, not the disregarding of everything. It's the detachment from those things that we experience. Divine cannot use our mind and body so long as we wish to use them for our own ends. Enjoy through renunciation. So this is saying that as we detach from things, we enjoy them more. Which is true. If we enjoy them more with simplicity, we enjoy them more to understand that if they don't last forever, we are at peace with those things. We're at peace with letting go. We're at peace with other people letting go of things that we have or ourselves, and we enjoy them in a much greater vibration and frequency through that renunciation and through that detachment of experience. And so is the advice of the Isha Upanisads. Good and evil do not depend on the acts, but on the frame of mind one has. Absolutely, it's intention. Frame of mind means intention. Good and evil are based on intention. Your action, words, thoughts are based on your intention. You own the karma of everything, no matter what it is, because it's your intention for the outcome, be that your own action or the outcome of a collective action that you've been party to, moving to a specific end. So you cannot pass on karma to anyone or anything else. This is in a deluded state of understanding that many out there do believe and think, particularly those who move towards the darker practices and rituals within the psychical, occultic realm, believe this, and it's a nonsense, and it doesn't occur. We have to concur with divine purpose. Divine purpose is effectively, we all have the same divine purpose. Everyone's always seeking a divine purpose. Well, divine purpose is just that which makes you happy, but divine purpose is, as long as you're following and creating your divine experience to something that gives you joy in the experience of life, but doing it through the passage of directing everything towards greater acknowledgement and assent and awareness and absorption and integration to the divine force of grace. Move it towards the Godhead at all times and create your experience whatever you wish it to be. That is your purpose, ultimately. It's the same purpose for everyone. Make the physical experience what you wish it to be, what you choose it to be, but do it through the progression towards a more divine state of actual real being. When we resist it, we can concur with divine purpose, or we can resist it, of course, and then it becomes what we call disjointed, and we can go towards what we call evil actions, negative intention. Goodwill and good works flow when you allow a divine passage to flow through you. When the soul is at peace, so goodwill and good works flow when the soul is at peace. The greatest sorrows are borne lightly. So this is what we mentioned before. The path becomes very peaceful, becomes light, becomes effortless, becomes free-flowing of light, because we're just following the path. We're not fighting against what we know we should not fight against. Life becomes more natural. We let our life flow of itself. Absolutely. Contemplation is the way to clean one's mind and heart. It means rest, withdrawal into the interior solitude. We don't stop there. We overflow with love that communicates. So we draw into ourselves. We contemplate our passage. We meditate. We are in silence. We allow external divine thought to manifest from within to without. And then we communicate with love and teach to others. Life is compared to a sacrifice where the fee shall be asceticism, which is the price. Physical life is sacrificed to the passage of ascent and liberty, integrity, truthfulness. The Taittiriya Upanisads gives a list of virtues that a student should follow. Of course, these are back in 700 BC. These are truth, virtue, welfare, prosperity, study and teaching, which are still relevant today. In one passage, all the virtues are brought together under the three das, which are heard in the voice of the self, which are heard in the voice of what's called self-restraint, which is dharma, self-sacrifice, which is dana, and compassion, which is daya. These are the three das that are the list of virtues for life. The Prajapati, which is the creative deity and archetype, conveys three classes. So you've got Deva, which are gods, Manusya, which are men, and demons, which is Asura. We also have greed, which is Lobha, which what we can lean towards, anger, which is Krodha, and we can practice the practice of the three injunctions. We free ourselves. So we free ourselves by practicing Dharma, Dana, and Daya, which is self-sacrifice, compassion, and self-restraint. Okay, tapas is what's regarded as severe self-discipline for spiritual ends. So this is very, very strict discipline towards the spiritual practice. To the natural desires of the body and the distractions of the outer world, so we move away from those. Prayers are offered in the heart, and we have self-analysis. Resisting in temptation helps us in overcoming the next. So he's saying that as we renunciate or let go of and also detach from one thing, it starts to assist us to help do the same thing much easily to the next and to the next to the next. Nanyasa is superior to tapas, which is self-discipline. And Nanyasa, remember, was the same thing. It was, if we went back to the first slide again, if I remember, setting down, which is also the same as letting go or renunciating. Okay, let's get back onto this. Okay, Brahma Karaya is not sex destruction. So this doesn't call for the absolute abolition of sex. It doesn't. There's a lot of in every spiritual text there is renunciation of sexual procreation altogether. It doesn't actually state that that's what it's for. It's not sex destruction. It's talking about no attachment to that, to the desire-driven gulf between flesh and spirit. So he's asking for control around brahmakarya, which is a sexual desire element of ourselves. The control of it, the balance of it, helps creative work in all other areas. Mauna or silence is advised as leading the soul forward in contemplation. We cannot listen to the voice of God when our minds are dissipated, given to restless activity. Progress in silence is progress to the realization of spirit, silent and the silent creative power of God. Dhanna is, obviously, as we mentioned before, freedom from greed, assistance to those in need. It has no hope of we have no hope of immortality through wealth, or possessiveness is also condemned under that banner of Dhanna, which, remember, was the self-restraint, self-sacrifice, and Dhamma was self-restraint. Okay, Daya is karuna, which is compassion. Be peace with all, abhor cruelty and ill will. Forgiving attitude frees the individual. Remember an injustice. When we remember an injustice, it states we have not forgotten either the person or action. I personally remember every injustice. It doesn't mean that it's negative. If someone is able to forget every injustice and forgive every act, it's a very virtuous action. I'm not this way. I do forgive all things, move on, but I don't forget these things, because that would be naive to forget, naive to state that a person may well do the same thing if you allow, through naivety, the same act to be acted upon you, the same act to be executed upon you. Through naivety you can forgive, but if you forget, then the naivety could sustain. It opens the door to something or someone to do the same or perform the same act upon you. That's how I see it, so it's up to you how you want to interpret that. We can overcome the ravages of selfishness through compassion and forgiveness. The perfect man is a divine child in divine play. This is quite an interesting and important statement, which I espouse to as much as I can, but not fully. I don't fully practice it, rather, because we're not all perfect. Without fear or reserve, utter purity. A child's wise incomprehension is linked with living. So what they're saying here is, as we grow into adulthood, we forget how to be a child. And this is not plurality. This is not being puerile in any way. This is talking about allowing yourself to live life freely and openly without any apprehensions, to have play with life. As we grow older, we forget these childlike attributes we should try to sustain and retain in life, so that life flows. A child's life is nothing but joy, because it doesn't see this fear or reservation and and the barriers that we put in ourselves as adults. Yes, we have reality of life, but we also need to allow the divine play to exhibit through us, and that is called becoming more of a divine child as well as that mature adult. We have to gain the state which is unconstructed, in other words, not being so rigid in ourselves. Upanisads adopt a spiritual view of life. Body, life, and mind are regarded as conditions or instruments. They're not ends to themselves. They're means of expression of the universal spirit in us. We know this. The body is not ourselves. We should not identify with it. We should not attach to it. It is a vessel which we must look after to keep maintain its healthy state, mind, body, and energy. But it's not. It's just an instrument of experience in this lifetime, in this realm. Ritualistic practices are reinterpreted in the Upanisads, as the author states, and it states they are to prepare the mind for spiritual realization. So it says there are rituals, there are practices, there are certain sacrifices. This is not animal sacrifice, by the way, or people, even more horrifically. This could be anything, right? Sacrifice of a habit, a sacrifice of just a sacrifice in terms of flowers given to them, or some rice scattered in front of an idol or something like that could also be a sacrifice, a token. If rites are performed without knowledge of their meaning, they are not only useless, but I wouldn't say dangerous. I said maybe there. I would say not necessarily altogether useless either, but nothing has meaning unless we truly understand why we're doing something. So this is a true statement, regardless of which way one wishes to interpret it. There's no point performing acts and rituals and practices and rites if we're just doing them because someone's telling us to do them, because someone's saying it's a good thing to do. If we don't understand why we do them, and if they have no meaning to us, they will have no meaning at all. So we should avoid these things. I don't espouse to rituals, practices and rites. I just don't do them because they don't have any meaning for me personally, because I just move towards the divine grace, and that's the only passage I feel is of any importance. Everything else is to make us feel good. And we go on to this. When the heart is fully persuaded, there is little sense of sacrifice. Absolutely. There is little sense in rites. There is little sense in ritual. There is little sense in these repeating paradigms or dogmatic practices that we pass on to generation. If we're truly moving into the graceful state, these things are negated. They're not wrong. They're not relevant. They then become self-conscious sacrifice, which is burdened by a sense of self-righteousness and expectation of reward through that particular act. And if you think today's world is full of self-righteous virtue signaling, it's rife in today's world. It doesn't mean anything to most of the people who go around giving, having self-sacrifice or different acts because they feel self-righteous about it. Their ego is satisfied through the notion and the feeling of self-righteousness, virtue, self-virtue, ego. It's rife in today's world when many just do it because it's the next trendy thing to do. If it's of no true meaning in your heart space and you're not going to continue in life, continuing to act this way, then it really doesn't have that much meaning in a spiritual sense. Okay, and then caste divisions are mentioned in the Upanisads. I don't agree with caste at all, but I can understand back 700 BC and earlier in the advent of when these social systems were put in place, why they were there. But of course now they need to be removed, is my personal opinion there. But caste divisions are mentioned in some of the Upanisads, although they do not harden, however, to a rigid social system, so they don't promote it as a rigid social system. I don't think it should exist in any form whatsoever, whether it's a rigid or non-rigid social system. The four asaramas, which are successive stages in life, are the students. So within Hinduism, the Vedic asceticism, they say that you should study in your early years the Vedic practices, asceticism, meditation, prayer. Then you create a family, which is called householder. You go through your responsibilities to raise children, to raise a family. And then beyond when those responsibilities are over, you then recede back into a forest or a forest dweller. These are what those sages and seers were that created the Upanisads in the first place, who went into quiet contemplation. So you then learn, you create family. Then once that's done, you then move into a more ascetic life to then understand true reality greater. You move into ascetic life, you then detach and remove those possessional material aspects from life. And then you have sannyasa, which is renunciate, which is then moving into into much more of an ascetic existence. These are the four main aspects. Of course, people don't follow these passages, but this is the stated four Vedic states or Hindu states of successive stages of life. That brings us to the end of this very short passage on ethics. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, become this journey. Don't just practice it for reward and because somebody says that something is useful. Make sure it's important to you and that you're doing it for yourself and it has meaning.